will get us started. First off, thank you everyone for joining us today for our special speaker series on the self-fulfilling formula, a blueprint for your ideal future, with our guest speaker, Mike Martin, and moderated by the founder and CEO of Converge HR Solutions, Mark Izzo. Mark will be introducing Mike in just a moment, but just some housekeeping items. As you can see, we are in presentation mode, so everyone's microphone and cameras are off. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will make sure to get those questions answered. But I will hand it over to Mark now.
Anna, thank you. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, as Anna pointed out, please feel free to speak up, hit us in the chat, and Mike would be happy to answer your questions. So as Anna indicated, our topic today is the self-fulfilling formula, a blueprint for your ideal future. We're going to talk about a number of things, about cultivating mental fitness, about enhancing social fitness, and about mastering execution fitness as it relates to your employees and your organization. Our guest speaker is Michael Martin. Michael is a TEDx speaker, author, and accomplished business and executive coach and strategist with a wealth of entrepreneurial and consulting experience. Having worked with over 150 organizations, including Fortune 500 giants like Lockheed Martin, AT&T, Corning, Credit Suisse, Oracle, IBM, and more, Mike is known for his tech-savvy approach and adaptability. As a coach, Mike empowers clients to overcome challenges and achieve their full potential in today's dynamic business landscape. Besides his professional pursuits, Mike is a passionate musician with a 40-year dedication to drumming. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate you having me on today.
It is our pleasure, and I'm looking forward to jumping in. So if we could start, why don't you give us just a high-level overview of what we're going to discuss, and then I will start to ask some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the fortune of being able to give a TEDx speech this year, and wrote my first book right here, which was our topic today, the self-fulfilling formula. And I really put that together based on the idea of something that I experienced. So quick story, when my parents took me to the first day of kindergarten, my father told the kindergarten teacher that my parents had my IQ tested, and it was very high, and to expect me to be an excellent student, maybe the best one in the class. There was just one little catch though. My dad completely made that up. It wasn't true. They didn't have my IQ tested at all. But my father, having taken a psychology course, had understood the power of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so that reputation that my father planted the seed with in my teacher followed me through my first few years in school. And I actually became a very good student. And I believe that that set me on my entire path for my whole life, just based on that one thing that my father did. Showed he had a lot of guts to make that bold claim, but he also had a lot of faith in me. And so as I started my own company, Top Down Strategies, and I had this opportunity to do the TEDx, I thought, what better framework or strategy to talk about how we excel and how we can thrive in this world than my own personal experience with creating our own self-fulfilling prophecies. And that's what the self-fulfilling formula is. And it's those three things you mentioned: mental fitness plus social fitness plus execution fitness enables you to thrive, not only in your work, but in life.
Excellent. And when we spoke earlier this week, and thank you for the summary, Mike. When we spoke earlier this week, you did use that term prophecy, which kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop, and you told that story. Again, why, I think of the self-fulfilling formula, blueprint for your ideal future, as a journey, as a travels, as an adventure, not necessarily as a prophecy. Why that particular term?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I had that experience, and as you study human potential and achievement and personal development, something I've been fascinated with since I was a child, you realize that there are truths behind this. Behavioral science. I always say I love logic, science, and data. And so there are many frameworks. I chose that idea of self-fulfilling prophecy because there's, I believe, inherent magic in that cycle of what we believe driving our actions, how we act drives others' beliefs about us, and what they believe about us drives how they treat us. And so I asked the question, when we try to achieve something, can we take that real thing of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and can we engineer it? Can we manufacture it? Can we control that cycle and use it to help us set our goals, achieve what we want, and live better lives? So that's kind of why I chose it. And I think it's a
Got it.
very action-oriented thing, and it's a little bit of a different way to think about it than just pure goal setting.
Great. Thank you. Can you describe for us the blueprint that you've designed, as we just discussed, regarding mental fitness, social fitness, and execution fitness? How do those things work together? And then, as you outline that, I'll likely have questions to ask that'll drill down a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that it's a simple formula. It's a three-part formula. And as we'll probably talk about, and I certainly dive into this a lot in the book, those three elements, they work together. They build upon each other. When you have strong mental fitness, you create affirming beliefs that will create self-fulfilling, not self-defeating prophecies. And the way you interact with others will be positive and productive, leading us into social fitness. When we work with others, business and life, it's all about interacting and being social. And so we want to have strong relationships. When our mental fitness is strong, we have great relationships. When we have great relationships, people will act with us in ways that are in line with the prophecy. They'll reinforce and help our prophecies to move forward, help our business to move forward, and we'll have more fulfilling lives because we have those strong relationships. And when we have those two things, now we can actually execute and take the actions needed to move that cycle of the prophecy, and it's the engine through doing the right things consistently all the time. And they feed each other, because then when you start doing the right actions, you have stronger mental fitness. You reinforce your beliefs, which improve your relationships, which improve the actions you take. And it just becomes this major positive flywheel in our lives and our businesses.
So we've talked, or there's been a lot of talk and a lot of press actually over the last several years, probably since 2020, about mental well-being in the workplace and mental well-being of employees, etc. Is this what we're talking about as you talk about mental fitness?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It covers really, and each of these three terms, I think of them very broadly. So mental fitness is both the beliefs we have about ourselves and how what our energy is and we bring to our interactions. And in my coaching, I focus a lot on a framework called positive intelligence, which was written by Shirzad Chamine. It's a book and a coaching framework that I use with my clients. And Shirzad and the book asked the question, why do only 20% of teams and individuals ever reach their true potential? And what they found through neuroscience and research in other areas is that we basically have 10 what they call saboteurs, ways that we get in our own way. We all have the judging ourselves. Oh, how could I do that? I'm so stupid, right? That's you judging yourself. Judging others. Oh, that guy, why didn't he use his turn signal? Shaking my fist at him, right? That's judging others. Or judging our circumstance. Oh, the COVID, I mean, what can we do? It's ruining our business, right? When we do that, we end up, taking on a victim mentality. And we want to have a positive victor mentality and not fall prey to these saboteurs or let them hijack us automatically. We want to take control of it. And so this positive intelligence framework applies to ourselves, but it also applies to our business. And it's very, very powerful. Number one, in understanding what are our saboteurs. And you can go to positiveintelligence.com/saboteurs to take a free assessment. And I will make an offer. If anybody wants to discuss their results with me, I'm more than happy to make myself available to do that. But when mental fitness is weak, and we can be overcome by self-doubt, we can struggle to bounce back from a hardship. We're very susceptible to burnout. We may have a lot of stress or difficulty managing our anxiety. We may lack focus. We can get sidetracked by failures. We may have conflict in our relationships. And we don't communicate that well. You know, when you get upset or angry, you don't communicate well. And so the more we can work on this, and positive intelligence gives us actual frameworks to improve our mental fitness, we get better results. And apply this to a business. When your mental fitness is weak, you have high absenteeism, you have stress in the workplace, you have disengaged employees and colleagues. Your company growth is going to be hampered by this. Your sales, you're not going to achieve your sales targets. And so more and more, and I think the pandemic has highlighted this, the importance of mental fitness, having people feeling good, being positive and effective within their own way of thinking and approaching their work is a major driver in economic prosperity.
Yeah, and it's what companies have really, like I said, focused on over the last several years, and maybe even prior to COVID, but certainly it jumped to frontline headlines in terms of front page headlines in terms of the last several years, and companies pushing initiatives aimed at doing what you just described.
And it's really the foundation, right? If you don't have this, you can explore the other areas.
Yeah, and so that's a great segue into the next topic, and that is sort of the social fitness. What do you mean by that? And give us some color commentary, if you would.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I read and learned about that had a profound effect on my life was the Harvard study of adult development. It's a study being conducted and still going on today, being done by Harvard. And the study took a group of people, and it's been going on for 85 years. So I think it is the longest running study of its kind. And they studied people for 85 years and they asked, what does it take to thrive in this world, in life? What does it take to have a happy, healthy, and successful life? And what that study found through their research is the number one most important factor in having a happy, successful life is relationships. And so when I found this out, it shook me because throughout my career, I had a point in time, and I talk about this in my TEDx, where I was really struggling. Even though I was successful, my relationships were suffering because I was, quite frankly, way too focused on work, working too many hours, and allowing my relationships to suffer. And so when you put intentionality and focus on your relationships, everything else is better. And you actually, it's kind of like the secret ingredient to living a great life. And I'll talk about it I think of relationships in really two ways. The first are those relationships that sustain us. The really important ones, our family, our friends, our spouse, partner, loved ones, communities we care about. These sustain us. They are the person we can turn to in times of struggle. They can give us advice. They bolster us up. And as we get older, this is the person we rely on and have companionship with, or the people. Then you think about helpful relationships, right? The relationships that help your career and your business and your professional life. Mentors, coaches like me, employers, employees, coworkers, vendors, suppliers, and customers. These relationships help us on our path. And we want to be intentional here too in seeking out those relationships that can provide value to us and help us further our journey. But I'm not talking about like what's in it for me transactional. These need to be genuine. And the more you overlap these two relationships, the more you will thrive. And so that's kind of how I look at them.
It's interesting when we talked earlier in the week, I brought up and this is a topic that my team has talked about extensively and with some of our clients. I brought up the Gallup survey and the best friend at work question, which is when you read it on its face is a little strange, right? You don't, my best friend doesn't work with me necessarily, right? But there's meaning behind that. And I think it's that relationship meaning. And I think it goes to the issue of employee engagement, which directly goes to the issue that we're going to talk about next, and that is business execution, right? And so there's something there, obviously, on the relationship level, and that has also become a very hot topic in a lot of the literature lately around how people age better, how people
Right, right.
live longer, how they thrive in retirement, right? All of those things are
Yes.
related directly to those relationships. So that's a really important one.
Yeah,
Um,
if I may, let me just
yeah,
add a
please.
couple comments there. Your last comment is so spot on, and I encourage people to go check out the Harvard study. Robert Baldinger, the manager of that study, the current manager, has given a TED talk, and you can find it on YouTube. Highly recommend everybody check that out as well. As we age, right, having that, it's the whole idea of loneliness and the opposite is having these thriving relationships that will sustain you. And at the end of the day, when you look back on your life, it's the relationships that matter. You're not going to remember, oh, that one night I stayed extra 3 hours at work, right? You're going to remember those tender moments with your loved ones. You're going to remember the family vacations you took. And so don't wait for that. Make those things happen now, whatever it takes, and foster and build those relationships. And then I'll just comment too on work, right? You brought that up, the best friend at work.
Yeah,
If you look at any high performing endeavor or high stress thing, right? Whether that be football players on a team or any team sport, or even unfortunately in war and soldiers, when you ask the individual, why did you do it? What were you focused on? It's the person next to them. It's my teammate. It's the soldier next to me. I fought for them. I fought for that person. And the more we can create a workplace that emphasizes this and encourages us to have that kind of level of camaraderie and strong positive relationships at work, we're going to be broadly more successful. So relationships aren't just a nice to have, they're actually a very essential component in the whole thing. And again, if you go back to this idea of engineering our own self-fulfilling prophecy by using the self-fulfilling formula, the key point is we can't have a self-fulfilling prophecy on our own. We need others to have their beliefs in us and take actions towards and with us. So again, you can't have a self-fulfilling formula or a prophecy without strong relationships.
sure. Understood. And so we've talked about mental fitness and we've talked about social fitness, and now we're going to jump into execution fitness. So talk a little bit about that if you would, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you remember, if we think again about a self-fulfilling prophecy, it's beliefs. We've talked about that with mental fitness, and it's actions. And we talked about that a little bit with relationship fitness. Action is the engine that drives the entire cycle. Just like you can't have that cycle without belief, you can't have it without others, you cannot have it without action. I wrote this, my very first book this year. And so, how did I do that? Well, I created my prophecy that I'm an author. But I can't just believe that and go magically have a book appear, right? I had to take massive action. I had to write every day, a certain amount of words every day. And actually, I figured out how many words I had to write per day to reach my goal of when I wanted the book done. And I had to do that. It takes massive action. So your belief must be backed up by action. And how do we do that action well and make sure that this is a self-affirming and drives our business and our workplace forward in the ways we want it to? I call it consistent, correct action. That simply means do the right things and do them all the time on a regular basis. And when we do that, we get 1% better every day, or we do the 500 words you have to write and you do it every single day. The consistency is what drives it. And so, how do you get that? Well, you focus on creating a workplace with the right that encourages and cultivates the right habits. And habits, what we do daily, drive that consistency. So, what I'm espousing here is to focus on the result, not so much on the result. You have to hit this number. I don't care how you do it. When you have this obsessive focus on just the results, you're creating stress and you're not putting people in the best light or situation to get the thing done. Rather, we need to focus on the process, the habits, do the right things consistently. You want to sell X number of dollars in your organization? Well, what are the things we do to make sales? We have to talk to people. We have to make so many calls a day. So you create the habit of making your sales calls every day or whatever that thing is for your situation. But it's about doing the right things consistently, do the right things regularly with a focus on the process. The results will happen if you do all the things right. And this is establishing standard operating procedures, making sure people are trained and educated on them, and that you follow them consistently and you monitor them to make sure they're being done.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to dig into connecting this to business results through some of my questions as we drill down here a bit. But I think what you just said is really important, and we talked earlier again this week, and we brought up the issue of process, and I brought up Deming, the guru of all management, basically said that 80% of problems in organizations are not people. They're related to process or lack thereof, or bad functioning process, or lack of measurements, etc. And that's how, if I understand your model, by focusing on process, not just the result, that's how organizations actually transform to becoming better functioning, economic, viable organizations. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
So you use the word transformative. I think in your book and maybe on your website I saw it as well. Help us understand how this model, large picture here, if you will, helps organizations transform into what?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my coaching and my work with CEOs and business owners, we often talk about not only getting very strong clarity about where you want to go, what is your point B, and where are you right now. And so, this framework, the self-fulfilling formula, for people and businesses, it's about we understand where we are, where we want to go. What are some of the things that will be along that path? What are some of the things that can get in our way? And I really feel that this formula, the mental, social, and execution fitness, really encompasses a framework that you can apply to transform your organization from point A to point B, because it contains everything that both the individual needs to make progress, as well as organizationally. It works fantastic for the individual. Like I said, my prophecy of being a great student or owning my own company and with top-down strategies, or becoming a TEDx speaker or writing a book, those were all prophecies. But I backed it up by using this same formula, right? It's a little meta, but how did I write a book? Well, I used the self-fulfilling formula to do it. And so these things can apply to businesses. If businesses focused on establishing strong mental fitness, using these frameworks to help coach their people up to improve their mental fitness, and became relationship centric, not customer centric, not employee centric, not one or the other, but both, all. We are a relationship centric organization. We care about our employees, we care about our customers, our vendors, suppliers, communities, and apply that intentionality of creating meaningful, high performing relationships that are mutually beneficial in every direction for the organization, the employee, the external people. And I think it's incredibly important if we go back to the Harvard study and think about those significant relationships that are maybe in work, but maybe not in work. And as employers, we honor the idea and the reality that our employees, outside relationships, their spouse, their partners, their friends, families, are really important. And give them that honor, which means, could be time off when it's needed. It could just be care and concern about it, working with the employee so that they don't have to sacrifice the, like the Harvard study said, the thing that's going to make their life worth living. They don't have to sacrifice that for our company. You're going to be wildly competitive for high quality talent.
Got it. Describe, if you would, for us, Mike. You've worked with a lot of organizations, and I'm going to ask you some questions about that in just a moment. But a short case study, not too detailed, but some of the results that you've seen, positive business results by applying this formula.
Yeah, kind of keep a broad scope there, but certainly I've seen and I've worked with sales teams that have radically improved their capabilities and closing sales and improving their entire sales process. I worked with one company where we actually sat down and we did role playing with the sales cycles that were happening, and I observed them. I had them, one was the client, one was the salesperson, and they reversed roles. And we uncovered so many things around these three vectors, the mental fitness, the social fitness, and just how they were doing their sales process, that we had a 35% turnaround. And they actually were used to having a 30% decline in seasonally. During when every other year they had that 30% decline, we actually grew by 5%. So we turned it around 35%. I've seen other organizations have their highest sales ever by using these techniques, having increased by 4 times the normal sales they do, because when you approach it with this in positive intelligence, we call it PQ channel. That is sort of the intentionality you come to your interactions with positivity rather than negativity. You can have amazing, amazing results.
So we do a fair amount of work with leaders and emerging leaders, et cetera, and it seems to me that they play an integral part in what you're talking about here. Can you talk a little bit about, so what does the leadership mindset need to be in order to, one, accept your formula, and two, be able to implement it throughout the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I say this a lot when people ask me, who I like to work with and who I like as clients. It's an openness to growth is requisite, right? You have to be open to be coached, be advised, and realize that you want to go from where you are today to some new level. That's number one. And so as leaders, and it's funny, I just had a group that I coach the hour before this meeting. We had this discussion on there where we were talking about sort of there's no real destination, right? You never want to be like, hey, I've arrived. I'm the expert. I'm perfect. I've got it all, right? You always have to have that growth mindset of where do I go from here? That's number one. And then this framework that we've been talking about today is, it's not just those three things. Beneath each of those, there are frameworks like positive intelligence and the law of self-control and execution frameworks in terms of how we intentionally set goals and achieve them. And there's a lot of material behind it. But those three buckets, in my mind, are the main thing. And so I have a program where I work with leaders, and the number one job of any leader is creating more leaders, right? We don't want to be the solution. Some employee of ours brings a problem and then, oh, I'll just handle it. And you take it onto your plate and do it. No, you want to coach that employee. If they need a new skill, I say to my clients, learning always precedes growth. So if you want to grow, ask yourself, what do I need to learn? And so, coaching your employees, coming with that kind of coaching mindset when you're working with your teams. How do I improve this team? How do I give the skills that we need? What did we need to learn as a team, or I need to learn as a leader, so we can grow and achieve the next thing we want to do?
So as I was looking at the companies that you have worked with, they tend to be pretty large ones, right? Name recognition, we know who they are. Describe if and how this model is able to be applied to, say, my business market, which is the small to mid-sized business, as opposed to the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been fortunate in my career to have worked with many different companies. That kind of happens when are a consultant, and I spent most of my career helping other companies rather than just being in only one. And I've worked with, excuse me, like you said, some very large names, household names, but I've also worked with very small companies. I've had clients who are, local landscape companies, medium-sized tech companies, and these things that I'm talking about. And I don't just claim that my formula is the only way. It's just the framework and label we put on the underlying truths be, that are there about personal and organizational development. There are many frameworks, but they apply because they're true and because they're based on logic, science, and data. They apply to a single person, to a team of two, a team of 10, or really any size, from one person all the way up to very large thousands of people in an organization.
So this is a scalable model. It can be used in the non-for-profit world for our colleagues that are in that space, as well as small and mid-sized businesses, as well as, like you said, the common household names of the Fortune
Absolutely. And actually,
500
I have
companies.
some clients who are nonprofit organizations.
Right,
It works
right.
very well with them too.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking through as I was preparing for this, is sort of like, okay, I saw the names of those companies and I started to think about, well, small and mid-sized businesses. And then I started to think about our clients, and we have some not-for-profit clients. And
Yeah.
so, but it seems to me that this is scalable amongst any of those.
Yeah, it's really the beautiful part about it. And also, part of my thinking when I put it together is to make it scalable and applicable. And like I say, even in my TEDx talk, this works amazingly well for an individual, right? Personal development. You can take this formula and apply it to your own life. You can apply it to your personal relationships, your professional ones, but it also works for businesses, groups, communities, governments. And the more, just imagine, if more and more organizations focused on these ideas of having positive mental fitness, where we're thinking clearly, we're positive, we're raising our daily level of happiness consistently, we're having amazing relationships, we're approaching each other with empathy instead of vilifying the other. We're actually approaching it from a place of how can we work together? How can we achieve? How does the rising tide lift all of our boats? And executing, really doing things that matter, executing on a massive way, amplifying the impact that our organization has, whether it's a nonprofit or it's our business. When we work with a customer or we help somebody through a nonprofit, the ripples of that help go out to their family, their friends, what they do with their lives. So, not to be too grandiose sounding, but there is a point in my TEDx where I talk about this. Imagine a world with more and more people focused on these things. What could that be like? How could we solve conflicts? How could our businesses thrive? How could we solve some of the major challenges that face us as a human race? I mean, I know it might sound grandiose, and I do talk about this in the book. I like to think big, and I think it's applicable from the single person all the way up to the largest scale you can imagine.
So we read so much about employee engagement and the impact that that has on business, right? If you have an employee engagement score of X, you can see that sales are going to increase by Y and profit is going to increase by some other metric, etc. What have you seen in organizations you've worked with using this formula and this model as it relates to and its impact on employee engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. It has profound effects on that. First of all, I kind of like the framing of this question in terms of measurement, right? You know, measurement is so critical in our organizations and our business, understanding where we are and if we're trying to transform, we're doing something new, we're making a change, or we're implementing a mental fitness program or an employee engagement program. Is it working? I say this all the time. I already said it several times, but I love logic, science, and data, right? And data is very critical. It's important to measure is what we're doing creating the result we want. And so I've seen organizations um, start by having a real struggle to attract and retain talent, talent being their number one issue, to talent and employee engagement being an absolute strength because they are creating the environment which cultivates this growth. Just think about it. If you go to work every day and you think about, you know, your worst mental picture of the worst job you can imagine, it's probably something that is stifling to you, that you're not growing, you feel it's dead end, you don't like the environment. That's these things. Your mental fitness is low, your social fitness is low, you're not interacting in engaging ways with people. Your execution fitness is low because you're not motivated, you barely want to go. If you create an environment with the opposite, where we have these thriving relationships where people are working for each other, not so much the organization, but that person in the foxhole next to them, to use that analogy. Um, they want to go there because they have these great relationships and they know that it's not negatively impacting their life. Their home life is great and you have that good balance. And if your employees feel like they're growing in their role at your company, you've done it right.
You mentioned hiring and we actually do a bunch of that at Converge for our clients, and I'd like your thinking around that. I mean, we were talking about employee engagement and you were talking about talent and hiring and so forth. Give us some color, if you would, around what Mike's thinking is on the hiring of employees.
Yeah. So one concept that I'll quickly touch on that I go over with my clients a lot is the Carnegie Triangle, right? It's the Carnegie Institute did this study, and they talked about, if you think, and I'll ask everyone listening to just picture a very high achieving individual, could be an athlete, like a coach, it could be a successful CEO, somebody in your mind who's achieved a lot. If you think about describe that person, describe their attributes. What comes to mind? You know, they're probably dedicated, growth mindset, hardworking, resilient. You're going to be describing their attitude. You're not going to be describing their specific skills or expertise. And so my thinking with hiring is hire on attitude and aptitude. So the Carnegie Institute found that only 15% of any factor for success in any job or endeavor is skills and knowledge. A full 85% of what drives your results is your attitude. And reflect on that in your own life. Or an employee you might know. They come to the office, they don't want to be there. They're like, oh, you mean I have to write that report? Oh, right? That's attitudinal. But if you have somebody who's like, yeah, I want to learn, I don't know how to do that. Can you teach me? Um, they're coming with the right attitude. You can teach the skills and the expertise, and they will be teachable because their attitude. So I recommend you hire on attitude first and foremost. So if you're not asking interview questions that reveal a person's attitude, start thinking about how you can do that. So that's the hiring process itself. And then, when it comes to having people want to join your organization and stay with you, I think if you uh, take this formula that we've been talking about and you make it a place that's welcoming and demonstrates to the potential candidate that you will grow here. Maybe you implement a mental fitness program like positive intelligence for I do that with my clients. I help them implement high performing teams using positive intelligence. You're going to grow here and you're not going to have to sacrifice your life to work here. You'll be able to attract and retain anybody you want.
Great answer. I think in your book you describe happiness as a business strategy. It
Right.
took me a while to wrap my head around it, to be completely honest with you. Can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of the underlying thing behind everything that I've been talking about. We are happiest when we're growing. When we have self-fulfilling prophecies, self-affirming things. And so, what I've learned through my work with positive intelligence is that we can actually raise our baseline level of happiness. We all have a certain level of happiness, and you can work daily to improve that, to become a happier person over time. And you can grow and be achieving the things that you set out to do, right? So when I say happiness is a business strategy, it's really what we've just been talking about. You have to think about your employees' happiness, and heck, even if you're the owner or the CEO, your own, right? My experience was I had a point in my career where I was miserable. My relationships suffered. My relationships with my friends and my family were not what I wanted them to be. Why? Because I was working all the time and I was just trying to advance my career. I didn't have the right balance. And so I was very unhappy. But I realized that happiness isn't just about achieving, or it isn't some external thing. When I make X salary, when I buy X house, or I own that car, it's never about that. Happiness isn't a destination, it's a state of being. And so life is the journey, right? There's no destination. We don't ever reach the pinnacle. We just constantly keep growing until the end. And so, when you realize that happiness is under your control and you can actually influence it and make yourself more happy through, the old saying, happiness isn't getting what you want, it's wanting what you have. You make that mental shift both for yourself. And if you can do this in your organization, the results are tremendous and the business results will be there. Again, the two workplaces, the one people hate going to, the one they love, which one's going to be better? And also think about the customers. Are they going to want to work with that business, or are they going to work with the one where everybody loves it?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Um, Final question, Mike, before we wrap up. And I think you've given us somewhat of a flavor of this, but I'd just like you to round it out if you would. What research data support is out there that basically you relied on, or that, like I said, supports your model?
Yeah.
We've talked somewhat about some studies. You talked about your love of data and facts, etc. What is out there that's actually saying, yeah, this is the way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So the frameworks that I use in with my clients, we've mentioned a couple already. Um, so, if we talked about relationships, the Harvard study, in each one of these areas, I personally feel that there's like the one thing that's like the major key to each of the three areas. So, we kind of start in the center with relationships. The Harvard study is probably, at least to my feeling, the number one thing. It's the longest running study. It's 85 years of data. They have an insane amount of data, including, biometric data about the participants, survey questions. It's a very, very thorough study. And if they say the longest running study in the world on this subject says that relationships are most important, I believe it. And so it's kind of hard to refute that study. Then you go to mental fitness. Again, there are many things, neurolinguistic programming, emotional intelligence, right? All of these things. There are many frameworks. I use DISC assessments and emotional intelligence assessments with my clients. I also use the Saboteur assessment. These are things that are based on data. DISC has been around for, I think, 120 some years. It's been used at companies from all the major companies you could think of, Motorola and IBM, they all use it. Baker Tilly, where I used to work, used it. So these are things that are very proven. And again, positive intelligence. It's not just what Shirzad thought. There are white papers, and you can go to positiveintelligence.com and read the scientific papers that are based on cognitive studies, behavioral science, etc. So this is all stuff that's based on very, well reinforced and well backed up things. Again, I didn't just pull this out of the air. I went to what I felt were the leading things. And again, I think positive intelligence, when you look at many of the coaching frameworks, I personally have found that it's what sits below because it's based on the behavioral neuroscience data. And then lastly, just quickly, execution. There's a lot of data. You can go through the case studies on what results clients have got by using these frameworks. But to me, it comes down to one thing that drives execution, and that's accountability. Accountability is the number one factor for execution. And I mean that could be your own accountability. If you're a great inner coach and you push yourself and you hold yourself accountable, you will execute. If your organization has good accountability structures in place and you're measuring the right things, you will execute. Many organizations that I've seen that have failed in doing the things they set out to do is because they had no accountability. I've seen it time and time again. And so that's my belief, and that's what kind of backs up where I'm coming from.
Right. Appreciate that. Mike, tell our audience how to contact you, and
Absolutely.
more about your book and TEDx.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book, The Self-Fulfilling Formula, A Blueprint for Your Ideal Future, is available on Amazon. You can get that. You can contact me too for a copy. I'm in the Philadelphia area, so I'm happy to, ship locally or, if you need a copy or even to meet up. You can find more information at Top Down Strategies, all one word, topdownstrategies.com. That's my website. There's a link to the TEDx there. My TEDx is on YouTube. If you search TEDx Mike Martin, you can reach me at mmartin@topdownstrategies.com. I really welcome anyone and everyone to reach out. I love having these types of conversations. You could probably, hopefully, tell I'm really passionate about personal and organization development. So I could talk about this all day long. Not that I'll keep you on the phone all day long, but reach out, hit topdownstrategies.com. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, I also host and run a podcast called From the Top. There are a few with that name, but if you go to topdownstrategies.com, you can find all the links to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and my YouTube channel, where you can watch the interviews that I do with entrepreneurs, and we talk about these subjects every week.
Well, we certainly appreciate it, Mike. And yes, we can see your enthusiasm, hear it through your voice, etc. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for the insight. Thank you for to all our participants, and wish you all well and have a great day. Thanks so much again, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. It was great chatting with you. Great conversation. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate your time.
Bye-bye now.
Take care.